Everyone, welcome back to the C programming tutorials which are brought to you by Zeedup Technologies. In this video, we will see that how can we use the if-else-if statements and the nested if statements. Also, we will be seeing the usage of the ternary operator in C. So let us start with the video. We are on the same piece of code which we wrote in the previous video, that is where we checked whether a number was positive or negative. So we simply used this condition that if n is greater than or equals to 0, we gave the message that it is positive, otherwise we gave a message that it is negative. But it is not 100% correct because 0 cannot be taken up into the category of positive number, and it was a shortcoming that we observed in the previous video. In this video, we are going to remove this shortcoming with the help of something known as the if-else-if statements in C. So how do they work? Let's see. So the pretense is same, that is to check whether a number is positive or negative or 0. So we are going to check that whether a number is positive, whether a number is negative, or whether a number is 0. Right now we have initialized n with 0 and then we are accepting a user entry for n. Now instead of this if condition, what we are going to do is we are going to check that if n is greater than 0, because that is the correct condition for a positive integer, that if any number is greater than 0, then it is called positive, otherwise it is called as negative. So sorry, that was an accident. So in the if else condition, we are getting that the number is negative. Okay, but we are not checking for 0. This is another condition, so we are going to incorporate another condition over here. Now this condition is going to lie between these if and else statements. How can we do that? For that purpose, we have to write simple else, put a space, and then write if statement. Since we have written if, so we are bound to provide it with a condition, because if is always present with a condition. No condition, no if statement. So within parenthesis, we provide a condition. This condition we are going to check that whether the entered number is 0 or not. So we are going to check if n is double equals to 0. In case n is double equals to 0, we need to provide another message, and this message is going to be printf mod d, that is the value of n is 0. And then we can just simply provide the value of n, or we can just simply write that the entered number is 0 or something else like that. A simple message, whatever you want. Then if it is not equals to 0, then we are going to get a message negative. That means let us understand that how it is going to work. Suppose I entered 3. So 3 is a positive integer. Here in scanf, value 3 is stored in n. Now it would be checked, n is greater than 0, so we will get a message that 3 is positive. Now suppose I enter 0. In that case, this condition is checked, it evaluates to be false, so the else part of this condition is evoked and it goes to another condition, because in the else there is another condition that has been observed, and it checks that whether n is double equals to 0. So since we provided 0, this message is going to be printed. Otherwise, if we provided a negative number, then the first condition evaluates to false, the else part of this condition is evoked, another condition is encountered, this condition is also evaluated to be false, so its else part is evoked and the message that the number is negative is printed. So let us just test our piece of code against all these things. First the positive number, then the 0 and the negative number. So I have just built up my code by clicking on this corg sign, or you can just go to this build and select this build option, or use the shortcut control F9 to just build your program. Then you can just run it. First of all, you are supposed to enter a number. Let's enter 90. 90 is positive, which is absolutely correct. then again run it. No need to build it this time because it's already been built and no changes have been made since its last build. The number I'm going to enter is 0. 0 is 0, of course, that's the message. And then again we try to run it, this time with a negative number, say negative 78 minus 78 is negative. So that is how we can work with if else statements. These statements are known as if else statements or if else statements. They can be used to check multiple conditions at once, not only a single condition but more than one conditions at once, which we did right now. So this was a simple example of the if else statements. The other statements that we have are known as the nested if else statements. So nested if else statements, a simple definition of a nested if else statement is that if these statements are present in another if statements, then it is known as a nested if else statement. Okay, so let us understand it. We are going to use this simple example only. So this positive, negative or 0, that we are going to check whether a number is positive, negative or 0, but we are going to make some changes. So let's just minimize this code and we are just going to actually comment out this whole code. Okay, yes, now we are going to write fresh piece of code. So this is where our code is going to be written. First of all, we are going to provide it with an if condition. We are going to check that whether n is greater than or equal to 0. In that case, so if n is greater than or equal to 0, then it can be either positive or negative. Okay, or if this condition is not met, then we have got an else part which shows us that the number is negative. So we can just simply use a printf statement and write here as negative. Right, now over here, if the number is greater than or equal to 0, we get into this condition. Then we are going to check that if n is double equals to 0. So if n is double equals to 0, then we want another message to be printed, that it is 0. Otherwise, what do we want to do? That if n is not equals to 0, then what we want to print? We want to print that n is positive, right? So that is positive right here. Okay, so let's understand it. If n is greater than or equal to 0, this body would be executed. In this body, there is another if condition which checks that whether n is equal to 0 or not. If n is equal to 0, 0 will be printed. Otherwise, positive will be printed. And if this condition is false, that is n is neither greater nor equal to 0, then this condition would be used, or this body would be used, and negative would be printed. So since this if statement, that is n equals to 0, is residing inside this if statement, so this is an example of nested if statements. Let us just write a comment over here so that we are able to identify it, that it is nested if. Let's just build this piece of code and run it again with a positive number 78, positive, with a 0, that is 0, so we are getting 0, and with a negative number, say negative 45, negative as the output, which is absolutely correct. So this was the example of the nested if statements in C. Now let us just comment it once again, because we are going to use another operator actually, that is known as the conditional operator or the ternary operator in C. So what we are going to do is we are simply going to store int C, that is going to store a condition, and we are going to check that if the condition we are going to check is whether n is greater than 0. If the condition is true, we want to print like say greater than 0. Else we want to print it is less than 0. Okay, So, or we can just use like 1 or 0 over here. So what happens is we can now just print the value of C. Since C is integer, so we are using mod T, and then we are going to print the value of C. What happens? The user is supposed to enter a number. Then in the variable C, we are using this ternary operator to make sure to first check whether n is greater than 0. If the condition evaluates to be true, then 1 is stored in C, otherwise 0 is stored in C. Actually, these double quotes are not needed. We can simply store 1 and 0 like this in C, and whatever the value is, we are going to print it. Okay, so let's just build it up once again and try to run it. So the number we are going to check is 90. So we are getting 1 because 90 is greater than 0. Again we run it, a number less than 0, say minus 80. We are getting 0 because minus 80 is less than 0. So this is the usage of this conditional operator or the ternary operator in C, which is again used to check a condition and works just like an if-else statement. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching.